Hey, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of Loser's Lunch, our exploration in excellence. I'm coming to you on Sunday night, Father's Day. I'm going to be at the Eastern Secondary here in Orlando the next couple of days. So we are taping this, not a live Loser's Lunch, but lively. So I will kind of get right to it. By the way, there's going to be a chart that Jen is either going to flash or post a link to when I get to it a bit later. Because it's not live, she might not be able to post the link in real time. But a really interesting one and somewhat thought-provoking as we try to figure out where interest rates are going here over the next 30, 60, 90 days. In terms of the data this week, it's a pretty light week. Ginny's roll on Tuesday. We got some home sales data. Of course, mortgages on Wednesday. On Thursday, claims, market PMI, KC Fed, some gas data. Nothing that anybody gets too overly crazy about. It's a couple of things that I like to see. I mean, I'll say this. Almost across the board, the data has been worsening. Including inflation, by the way, other than the CPI report. And we're going to get to that in a minute. So where I think it'll be interesting for me to look at a KC Fed or a market PMI number, or for that matter, even sentiment on Friday, is are we continuing that trend? After a slow Q1, a negative GDP, which kind of took most people by surprise, if the data is continuing to worsen, to me, it becomes more and more likely that we may officially enter the recession zone. So some of these lesser followed data points help build a little bit of a picture. If you have a big number, you could sort of write it off as an outlier. But if it's another bad number and it begins to stack, then I think it becomes, a bit more anecdotally likely that the economy is worsening. Lastly, on Friday, we've got some home sales, building permits, and like I said, some inflation sentiment numbers. So other than the housing data, which I think is of extreme interest, particularly for folks in our business, and I say that we have folks of other industries that tune in, but certainly a large swath of our viewership is mortgage, title, appraisal, that sort of real estate. So home sales are of particular interest to us. So last week, some data, by the way, again, fairly light week, but PPI came out on Tuesday after we were live on Monday. By the way, previous month revised down, headline missed, prices paid missed. Look, albeit both numbers reasonable, okay? I mean, don't get me wrong. It wasn't like we were, showing deflation here. But nonetheless, again, building a story. Are things getting worse? Is inflation peaking, abating? So I think that PPI, while not a report along with CPI that I generally care a hell of a lot about, continues to build a story and paint a picture. Mortgages were actually up for the week last week. The retail sales number, bad number, negative 0.3. They expected positive 0.2. Previous month revised down. That to me, when you combine that with some of the confidence and sentiment numbers, makes you wonder if the consumer is going away and hiding. Of course, you had the big Fed announcement. More on that in a minute. Bank of England tightened. Housing starts down big, almost 14.5%. Although the previous month was revised up significantly. We thought we had a negative number. It actually printed 5.5. And I've got to say this. This is sometimes where I keep saying sort of grassroots, ear to the ground cap markets sometimes, if not most times, certainly in my career, has proven to be more useful than some of this bullshit data. How do we say we're negative and then print like a really good number, 5.5%? I mean, it defies some logic, folks. I mean, let's be honest about things. We could be off a little bit. We thought it was going to be 2 and we're 10%. Imagine if you were 10% off in your job. Imagine if in life, our error rate, of course, if you're a weather reporter, you're probably about 40% off, 80% off. But imagine if in most of our jobs, we had a 10% error rate. But anyway, so if we predicted 2 and it came in at 2.2, 1.8, 2.5, 20%, 25%, we predicted negative 0.2 and it came in at 5.5. Get the fuck out of here. Philly Fed, by the way, another huge miss. 5.5 came in at negative 3.3. Housing starts missed. Building permits down big, 7% drop. Claims up slightly. Continuing claims up slightly. And then leading index, which I assume is leading economic indicators. Usually it doesn't, it reads just that. That's sort of what they're historically called. But negative 0.4, and that's at least the second straight month of negative. There might have been a prior month. I just get the last 2 in this quick little snapshot. So I don't know. To me, where there's smoke, there's fire. We've been talking about it. Been talking about it since November. When no one was talking about it. And so rather than just say, hey, we saw this coming, let's talk partly why. And this is the part of the program where if Jenna can pop the chart up, she's going to do it. If she can't, there's a link. You pop it up. And I don't have it in front of me. I probably should, by the way. But this is the correlation, okay, of ISM. And you've heard me talk about ISM. It's, to me, one of the more reliable, current, topical economic indicators. And we get one for services, one for manufacturing. They're separated, whereas a lot of these indicators sometimes are smushed together. Certainly there are components. And you take non-farm payroll, for example, that fraud, at the very least, they do break it out a little bit. You have private, you have government, and things of that nature. But sometimes all we look at is headlines, okay? And certainly the bots, who are trading algorithms, sometimes will just look at headlines. Where I like that is it's broken out right from Jump Street. So that kind of helps us really dial in. But so looking at this chart, right? And so I was just so perplexed by the CPI number, and mainly because all of, PCE is weakening. The ISM prices paid have been weakening. And then all of a sudden CPI, just absolutely, blows through the roof. And you know me about some of these reports, right? So doing a little bit of research, stumbled across this chart that comps ISM prices paid to CPI. And what you'll see is you look at this chart, and we talked about CPI being a lagging indicator just in general, okay? And also not that reliable. How, some of the components of CPI, by the way, how huge component of it, we know that the market has been peaking. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a second as well. It's just like, if the price of few houses is really high, and as we talk about that in mortgage TBAs, if there's no liquidity and prices jump or drop, we tend to not that tends to be not as worrisome as if there's massive volume that brings upon a huge spike or drop in price. When there's not a lot of liquidity, it just, it makes you say, if three people are saying that this, price should go down amongst a market that usually has 30 people, I'm just making up numbers here. Do we really care about, those three people and the long-term impact? The short-term impact might be great or painful, but more the long-term impact. And, sort of same thing here with housing. We know that housing, that sales have been sort of shrinking, according to the MBA, the last few months. So it stands to reason that prices will be a little bit elevated. Does that necessarily mean that prices will stay elevated? Well, we're finding out quickly that that's not the case. Huge corrections from coast to coast is what we're hearing from a lot of our brokers, realtors, loan officers, partners. But if you look at this chart, folks, what you'll see, almost to a dot on this is that, first of all, these two indices move lockstep, okay? The second thing that you'll see is CPI has never been this far differentiated from ISM prices never. In 25, I don't know, that's pre-2000, so I don't know, 95, it's 22, 25 years, 28 years, 27 years, 30 years, whatever the beginning date on that chart is. In fact, they're usually identical, if not just a percentage basis different, and either month by month, okay, or it'll lag by a few months, possibly in a couple of these instances. Coming out of 2000, you could see that the lag might have been more like 6 to 12 months. Those are outliers. And then what do we see here? I mean, we see a CPI number, that's essentially triple ISM. And that is a huge outlier for me. So here's what I'm going to go on record to predict, okay? Either A, we have absolutely seen the peak of inflation here. And you could kind of see in this ISM number, that peak likely occurred, if I get this number bigger, in May, I believe that date is. Yeah, May, maybe January. Excuse me, not May, December, January, I believe is the peak. Not that easy to navigate on the phone. It was much easier on the computer. If you're on the link, hit that dot and you'll see. I think it was December, January, if I remember. Yeah, we had a little bit of a bounce, what looks like last month, but the general trend is lower. What you'll also see, by the way, folks, is there have been other points in time when we really didn't care about hotter ISM prices. And when I say not care, when we look at where interest rates are right now, particularly mortgage rates, more so than even treasury rates. I mean, heck, there was a moment in time back in 18, January 18 to be exact, where manufacturing prices were 73. So when we are trying to fight inflation, and that's what the Fed is doing, and this is where I think, A, the Fed is a bit offsides, and B, the people that are trading the dots are only doing so in an opportunistic way right now, because there's zero chance, in my opinion, that the Fed gets to the amount of hikes that they say they're going to get to ultimately. And the reason is, look at the data, look at the state of the consumer, look at the mindset of the consumer, and then look at what is historically a much more reliable source of pricing analytic, ISM, and for that matter, PCE that printed a little bit weaker 2 weeks ago versus CPI and say, this number is either going to get revised down or we've seen the peak. Now, here's what I'm going to say. That doesn't mean that I don't think prices are high. Okay, so the base price may be up forever. Okay, we may have recalibrated the price of certain things. Certainly not the first time that that's happened. By the way, that doesn't include everything. You know, and I use the computer as an example. You can go out and buy a computer for a tenth the price of my first computer, period. Okay, so there is zero inflation in computers since 19 whatever, when 82 or whenever the heck my first computer was. Negative inflation or deflation in the price of computers. So there are certain things that we buy or consume that may have seen a price increase forever. We've just established a new base, if you will. We don't necessarily trade base, though. We kind of trade percentages. So what I think you'll also see when you look at a CPI report is that, and you look at what base prices did over the summer, okay, they started to peak July, August, September. If you look at where they were earlier in the year, they were a bit lower. So when you comp year over year, it's not a shock that April, May, possibly June are going to look a little bit high. We saw a significant increase in housing prices last summer. Housing being a large component of CPI. My guess here, educated guess, would be we're going to see CPI year over year start to abate because we're comping year over year. And so if the summer was hotter than the spring, but this year, this spring is hotter than the summer, which is certainly what it's lining up to be, okay? This comes back to where figures lie and liars figure. We may print a negative CPI, which I would imagine is going to happen here sometime in the next 6 months, but stuff may be still super expensive, right? The same way we're printing a super hot CPI right now, when in reality, you talk to anybody and everybody in every industry, and they will tell you that in the last 3 weeks, and granted, the last 3 weeks aren't necessarily in that CPI report, but in the last 3 weeks, things are different. Watch prices are coming down. Housing prices are either coming down or houses are staying on the market. I'm hearing that listing agents are actually calling back buyers agents, okay? So the Fed is likely fighting a ghost the same way that they did summer of 15. And when I was on CNBC, I said the Fed is going to continue to raise rates, and they're going to wake up one day and they're going to say, what did we do? And that was 2008. And somebody over there needs to wake the fuck up and realize that aside from, and this is a real possibility, I don't want to discount this, aside from a worsening of the supply chain, we don't talk about Ukraine anymore, but, some significant development in the Ukraine, the likelihood that our economy and the global economy doesn't continue to get worse without the Fed doing anything. And on a historical basis, the less we buy, the lower prices are going to get. And this problem sort of takes care of itself, right? There's really no reason for the Fed to step on the neck of the economy and therefore on the neck of our society. So, these next 60 days, in my opinion, really, really, really crucial in terms of how the Fed acts. So let's talk about the Fed for a second. Why did we rally the last couple of days? Was on a conference call what was it, Thursday morning or Friday morning or whatever it was. And I said, hey, we might see a 25 basis point rally. And I'm sorry, it was on Wednesday before the Fed announcement, and we got a 19, and then we jumped the next day, and then we rallied again. Too early to know tonight what tomorrow is going to bring. I feel very confident that the 10-year has peaked. We've seen high yield on the 10-year. And so why are we rallying off of the Fed? Well, that's largely because Powell blinked. You know, he said that 75 is not a guarantee next month. Now, as hawkish as the statement was and their forecasting was, the presser in a lot of ways was sort of either the opposite of that, or certainly took a huge edge off of that. And so, you know, this brings up, you know, sort of a running joke about the Fed is, first of all, I don't know that they've ever gotten an economic prediction right. And traders know that, for the record. But secondly, if you're steadfast in moving the dots on the economy and on inflation, then why is 75 even a question mark in July? You know, it's almost as if they entered that meeting. And by the way, there was one dissenter, which also helps us. But maybe they entered that meeting like, okay, CPI, boom, hawk. And then all of a sudden, you know, on their plane and in their car and laying in bed the couple days running up post CPI report, worse. You know, sometimes they just maybe went too far mentally to kind of reel it in. And they sort of look, we're going to do it, but then maybe that presser was a bit of an oh shit moment. I think he flinched. I think he maybe played his hand a little bit, that they want to sort of, and I've been calling for this, you know, one big whack, hit us 1.5 points, and then say, look, 1.5 points, and we're going to go away unless something crazy happens. You know, this threat of 75, first things first, a lot of people are going to tell you that at this point, them moving interest rates doesn't help inflation anyway. How about they release some oil? Because that's the main driver here, is the price of fucking gas and oil. That would help more than anything, period. How about they press to get some chicken out? You know, seeing that the price of chicken wings has tripled or whatever. Ridiculous. People are just, you know, and here's the other component of CPI that doesn't necessarily get it right. Okay. And this also speaks to my liquidity analogy, right? It doesn't necessarily measure that people are going away from the things that cost a lot of money. Chicken is a good example. Let's just say that the Mancuso inflation index is purely based on chicken wings. Buddy of mine down here, Dan Brown. Shout out to the doctor, Dan Brown. All he does is eat chicken wings and Cheetos, I think. That's all I've ever seen him eat. So by the way, going short chicken wings in Isleworth, huge win. But if the Mancuso inflation index is purely predicated on the price of chicken wings, okay, and the price of chicken wings keeps going up, the inflation index is now 1 million, right? But people stop eating chicken wings. And the price of beef is actually going down. Is there really inflation? In a big way, in an important way, in a measurable way, in a demonstrable way, in a way that actually affects the economy. If a tree falls in the woods and nobody hears it, does it really fall? You know, so that might be an explanation, right, for why fighting inflation with traditional tools. And one of the things, you hear me always saying is, so the Fed is looking at the economy in 1950 terms, and we're in 2200 at this point, okay? If people just stop eating chicken wings, then there isn't inflation in a way that really impacts our economy. And therefore, fighting it is somewhat irrelevant. If you have, and I'm not sure what the number is, but 30% more people who work from home, the price of gas in an automobile means less. Okay? So ultimately, the Fed here, I believe, is fighting some of the same ghosts that they were fighting in 2005. And we know how that ended. All right, let's touch. So what are we doing here? The range still seems to be about 2.7 to 3.125, 320, something like that. Up at these levels, I've got a float bias, and I'm playing that day to day. The closer we get to 270, I've got a lock bias, and I'm playing that day to day. Bulls and bears make money, pigs get slaughtered. Look at the data. Be mindful of the difference between feel and real, and start asking around. When I believe that the earth is shifting below us, eyewitness economics oftentimes is the best. You go to the Dunkin' Donuts, ask them how things are. You go to the Macy's in the mall, find out what's going on. Go to the outdoor store, ask them how many barbecues they're selling, being that it's barbecue time. These will be really good indicators for where we may be headed. And that'll help you determine, whether to lock, whether to float. But it's hard for me to not have a float bias, certainly in the longer term. Not talking 1 week, 2 week locks with the 10-year where it presently is. So that being said, just to touch on sales here for a minute, just to sort of touch on the mindset of what I would be doing as a loan officer, what I'm asking the loan officers that I mentor and branch managers and brokers to do. And how do you win in a down market? Well, I posted this on Instagram last week. Be greedy when people are fearful, and fearful when people are greedy. It's just that simple. Most people will tell you, and I've used the word sort of capitulation. When is the bear market over? It's sort of when everybody just sort of gives up, right? When everybody's like, oh my God, the world is ending. Well, once the world has ended, there's kind of nowhere to go but up, right? Same thing on the other side. How do we end a run? We end a run when housing prices are up 50% year over year. We end a run when the price of watches are going for 3x retail, 4x retail. When people start saying, hey, this is ridiculous. Enough is enough. I'm willing to spend 5% more. I'm willing to spend 10% more. I'm not willing to spend double. And I think the same could be said in business, right? Is you have people, throwing themselves out of windows right now, figuratively. What am I going to do? It's dominating every conversation. So what you need to do is the opposite. You knock on that door, you speak with that prospect, you talk to a realtor, you interview a prospective home buyer. you need to use different language, a different mindset, different energy than the rest of the market. Interest rates, in my opinion, should have zero to do with whether or not someone buys a home right now. It should all be about the price of the house. If one is able to get a good deal or a better deal than the day before, most people will tell you that there's nearly zero chance that that mortgage won't get refied in the next 18 months. Zero. And that's why when you look at the 4.5, the 5, the 5.5, I mean, I'm going to say 6. Jesus, that doesn't even really exist. But the reason why those coupons don't pay up is because no one believes that those loans are going to stay on the books. So consequently, if you're able to get a good price on a house, then what you as a loan officer or as a realtor should be talking about is this is the right house, or it's a good price, or it's both. And the cost of getting this house might be a couple $100 a month for 6 months, for 3 months, for 12 months. Now, there are no guarantees. You've got to make your payments. You can't, got to keep your job. So this is not a foolproof plan. But ultimately, you are better off. And this is the part of the game that folks don't quite understand. We get so obsessed with rate. Is the underlying cost of the house far more important than your interest rate? I asked this question. Do you know anybody that hasn't refinanced their house at least once in the last 20 years? Anyone? Much less 5 times? What the hell do we care about interest rate for? It's a temporary thing. Do you care about your 401k right now? I mean, other than you wish it was up? Are you going to sell that? You're going to sell your stocks? Because if you're not, it's irrelevant. Everybody's sitting in your house that you haven't sold that's worth more than it was worth yesterday and last month and last year. Why haven't you sold it? Sell it. Put it on the market. All that matters is money, right? Sell the goddamn house. But what the house is worth is irrelevant if you don't sell it. That, to me, is the sort of perspective that we need to have. And by the way, on this Father's Day, and I know tomorrow is not Father's Day, but for those who are joining late, we're on tape delay here. But on this Father's Day, I think that anyone who is celebrating their father or has children celebrating them, they'll tell you in a penthouse, in an igloo, in a 2-bedroom house, in the Taj Mahal, what matters is your home, not the bricks and the sticks. Anyway, I'm off to the Eastern Secondary here in sunny Orlando. For those of you that are fathers, happy Father's Day. I'll be back with a guitar and a guest next Monday. Congratulations to Matthew Fitzpatrick for winning the U.S. Open. We've got Live Golf in Portland next week. Sam and Patrick teeing it up for the first time together out there. Sam had a great finish at the last event. Solid finish, really, really tough U.S. Open up there. Patrick made the cut. I think he finished about 50th. Certainly not to Captain America's standard, but by the same token, a lot of awfully good golfers did not make that cut. So, at the end of the day, cashed a paycheck in another major, has the most made cuts since 2013. And just a few cuts behind my buddy Charles Howell III, who has the most made cuts in the history of the PGA Tour. But anyway, Thanks for tuning in. See you next week.